Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. The sound of the key turning in the lock echoed through the empty house like a final verdict. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she stood frozen in the hallway, her hand still reaching for the door handle that would no longer budge. Behind her, she could hear the soft footsteps of Marcus approaching. And suddenly, the comfortable familiarity of her best friend's home felt like a trap she had willingly walked into. "Sarah," Marcus's voice was gentle, almost apologetic, but there was something else beneath it. Something that made her pulse quicken with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "We need to talk." She turned slowly, her breath catching as she met his eyes. This was Rebecca's son, the boy she had watched grow up, helped with homework, driven to soccer practice when his mother couldn't. But the man standing before her now was no longer that child. At 28, Marcus had become someone entirely different, someone who looked at her with an intensity that made her feel both terrified and inexplicably drawn to him. "Marcus, what are you doing?" Sarah's voice trembled slightly as she pressed her back against the locked door. "Your mother will be home soon." A shadow of something painful crossed his features. "No, she won't. Mom's flight was delayed. She won't be back until tomorrow evening." He took a step closer, and Sarah caught the familiar scent of his cologne woodsy. And warm, the same one he'd worn since college. "I made sure we'd have time alone." The confession hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece together the events that had led to this moment. Rebecca had asked her to check on the house while she was away on business, to water the plants and collect the mail. It was supposed to be a simple favor between friends, nothing more, nothing less. But Marcus had been there when she arrived. And now ... time, alone, for what? Sarah whispered, though part of her already knew the answer. Part of her had always known, even when she tried to ignore the way his eyes lingered on her during family dinners, the way his hand would brush hers when he helped her with her coat, the way he'd found excuses to visit his mother whenever. Sarah was there. Marcus ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so achingly familiar it made Sarah's chest tight. "To tell you the truth, I've been carrying for 3 years," he said quietly. "To finally say what I should have said the night before I left for graduate school." Sarah's memory flashed back to that night, the goodbye party Rebecca had thrown for Marcus before he left for his master's program in Chicago. She remembered the way he'd pulled her aside in the garden, the way he'd looked at her with those same intense brown eyes, the way he'd opened his mouth to speak, and then closed it again, shaking his head. "Marcus, you were 25 then. I was 42. He finished for her. "I know, I've always known." He took another step forward, and Sarah found herself unable to move away. "But age is just a number, Sarah. What I felt for you then, what I feel for you now, it's real. It's been real for longer than I care to admit." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she processed his words. She thought of Rebecca, her closest friend for 15 years, the woman who had been her anchor through her divorce, through her mother's illness, through every major crisis in her adult life. Rebecca, who trusted her implicitly, who had given her a key to her house and considered her family. "Your mother," Sarah began, but Marcus cut her off with a gentle shake of his head. "Doesn't have to know," he said softly. "Not yet. Not until we figure out what this is between us." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She pressed her palms against the door behind her, drawing strength from its solid presence. "There is no us, Marcus. There can't be. I'm your mother's best friend. I've known you since you were 15 years old. And I've been in love with you since I was 22, Marcus replied without hesitation. Do you remember my college graduation? You wore that blue dress, the one with the little flowers. You hugged me congratulations, and I knew I was in love with you. Not a crush, not some juvenile infatuation. Love. Sarah's breath caught. As the memory surfaced, she did remember that day. Remembered the way Marcus had held her just a little too long. The way his eyes had searched hers with an intensity that had made her stomach flutter. She had dismissed it then, told herself she was imagining things, that she was reading too much into a young man's gratitude. You were a child, she whispered, but even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. At 22, Marcus had been a man in every sense that mattered. Young, yes, but not a child. I wasn't a child, Marcus said, echoing her thoughts. I was young, maybe naive, but I knew what I felt. And I know what I feel now. He was close enough now that Sarah could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could count the faint freckles across his nose that had never quite faded. Tell me you don't feel it too, Sarah. Tell me you don't feel this connection between us. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to block out the magnetic pull she felt toward him. But even with her eyes closed, she could feel his presence, could sense the warmth radiating from his body. When she opened them again, Marcus was watching her with an expression of such tender vulnerability that it nearly broke her heart. It doesn't matter what I feel, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're Rebecca's son. She's my best friend. This would destroy her. Would it? Marcus challenged gently. Or would she want us to be happy? You know her better than anyone, Sarah. You know she loves you like a sister. Don't you think she'd want you to find love again, even if it's complicated? Sarah thought of Rebecca's constant worrying about her, the way she was always trying to set her up with colleagues or introducing her to eligible men at parties. Rebecca had been devastated when Sarah's marriage had ended 5 years ago, had watched her friend retreat into herself, building walls around her heart that seemed impossible to breach. Not with her son, Sarah said firmly. Never with her son. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah thought maybe he would give up, would unlock the door, and let her leave with her dignity intact. But then he spoke again, his voice soft, but unwavering. What if I told you I've tried to forget you? That I've dated other women, tried to fall in love with someone else, anyone else? What if I told you that every relationship I've had has ended because I couldn't stop comparing them to you? Sarah's heart clenched at the pain in his voice. Marcus, please don't. What if I told you that I moved back to town not because of the job offer, but because I couldn't stand being away from you anymore? That I've been living in this house for 6 months, watching you come and go, hoping for a moment like this? The confession hung between them like a confession in a church, sacred and terrifying. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes as she finally understood why Marcus had been so different since his return, why their conversations had felt charged with an undercurrent she couldn't identify. You've been watching me, she said, not quite a question. Marcus nodded, his cheeks flushing slightly. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly. I just I notice things. I notice when you're sad, when you're tired, when you're lonely. I notice that you haven't been on a date in over a year, that you spend most evenings alone, that you light that vanilla candle in your kitchen window every night at exactly 7 o'clock. Sarah's breath caught. The candle was a small ritual she'd developed, a way to mark the transition from day to evening, from work to solitude. She had no idea anyone had noticed, let alone that Marcus had been watching her from across the street. You can see into my kitchen from here, she realized, her voice filled with a mixture of wonder and alarm. The guest room upstairs, Marcus admitted. I've been staying there since I got back. I didn't mean to watch you, Sarah. It just happened. You're like a magnet, and I'm helpless against the pull. Sarah closed her eyes again, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words, by the realization that she had been living her life under the scrutiny of someone who claimed to love her. But instead of feeling violated, she felt seen. For the first time in years, truly seen. This is insane, she murmured. You're 28 years old. You could have anyone. I don't want anyone else, Marcus interrupted. I want you. I've always wanted you. And I think, if you're honest with yourself, you want me too. Sarah's eyes flew open, meeting his gaze defiantly. You're wrong. But even as she said it, she knew he wasn't entirely wrong. There had been moments, over the years, fleeting instances when she'd caught herself looking at Marcus with something more than maternal affection. She had dismissed these feelings as loneliness, as the natural result of being a woman in her 40s who had been without romantic companionship for too long. Am I? Marcus asked softly. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched her cheek. His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone, and Sarah felt herself leaning into the touch despite her better judgment. Remember last Christmas? Mom's party? Sarah's memory flashed back to that night. She had been helping in the kitchen when Marcus had appeared beside her, offering to help with the dishes. They had worked in comfortable silence until she'd reached for a glass on a high shelf, and he had moved behind her to help, his chest pressed against her back, his arms encircling her as he retrieved the glass. You could have moved away, Marcus continued, his voice barely above a whisper. But you didn't. You stayed there, in my arms, for just a moment longer than necessary. And I felt you tremble. Sarah remembered that moment with crystal clarity. She had felt his warmth, had breathed in his scent, had felt a flutter of desire so unexpected and strong it had left her breathless. She had pulled away quickly, busying herself with the dishes, but the memory had lingered. That was nothing, she said weakly. I was just feeling what I was feeling, Marcus finished. Don't deny it, Sarah. I know you felt it too. The connection, the electricity, the way the air seemed to change when we were close to each other. Sarah's resolve was crumbling with each word he spoke. She had spent years telling herself that any attraction she felt toward Marcus was inappropriate, that it was a betrayal of her friendship with Rebecca. But now, standing here in the hallway of Rebecca's house with Marcus's hand on her cheek, she couldn't deny the truth any longer. Even if I did, she said, her voice shaking, it doesn't change anything. We can't do this, Marcus. It would ruin everything. Or it could be the beginning of everything, Marcus replied. Sarah, I'm not asking you to decide right now. I'm not asking you to choose between me and your friendship with my mother. I'm just asking you to give us a chance, to see what we could be together. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words, the gravity of the choice before her. She thought of her empty house, her solitary dinners, her lonely nights. She thought of the way Marcus looked at her, the way he saw her not as Rebecca's middle-aged friend, but as a woman worthy of desire, of love. What are you proposing? She asked quietly. Marcus's thumb continued its gentle caress of her cheek. Dinner. Tomorrow night. Just the two of us. No expectations, no pressure. Just a chance to talk, to see if what we feel is real, or just the result of proximity and loneliness. Sarah opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. And if it's real, then we take it one day at a time, Marcus said. We figure out how to navigate this together. We find a way to be honest with my mother when the time is right. Sarah felt herself wavering, felt the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crumble. There was something about Marcus's sincerity, his patience, his willingness to wait for her that made her want to trust him, made her want to trust herself. And if it's not real? She asked. If we're just two lonely people mistaking proximity for connection? Marcus smiled then. The first genuine smile he had given her since she'd arrived. Then we have a nice dinner. And we remain friends. No harm done. Sarah knew he was oversimplifying, knew that there will be harm done regardless of the outcome. But she also knew that she was tired of being alone. Tired of denying herself the possibility of connection, of love. She had spent 45 years playing it safe, following the rules, doing what was expected of her. Maybe it was time to take a risk. One dinner, she said finally. But not tomorrow. I need time to think. Marcus nodded, understanding. When you're ready, I'll wait. And you'll unlock the door? Sarah asked, surprised by the hint of teasing in her own voice. Marcus laughed, the sound warm and rich. I'll unlock the door, though I hope you won't run away too quickly. He moved to the door, producing a key from his pocket. Sarah watched him, noticing the way his shoulders moved beneath his shirt, the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck. When the lock clicked open, she felt a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. Sarah, Marcus said, as she reached for the door handle. I know this is complicated. I know it's scary. But I want you to know that what I feel for you isn't some fleeting attraction. It's not about rebellion or forbidden fruit. It's about you, the way you laugh when you think no one is listening, the way you cry at sad movies, the way you take care of everyone around you without asking for anything in return. Sarah turned to face him, her hand still on the door handle. How do you know all of that? Because I've been watching you for years, Marcus said simply. Not in a creepy way, but in the way you watch someone you love. I know you, Sarah, the real you, and I love what I see. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes again. It had been so long since someone had seen her, really seen her, that she had almost forgotten what it felt like to be known. I have to go, she said softly. I know, Marcus replied. But think about what I said. Think about the possibility of us. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. She opened the door and stepped out into the evening air, feeling the cool breeze on her flushed cheeks. Behind her, she could hear Marcus closing the door, could imagine him standing in the hallway where she had just been, probably thinking about their conversation. As she walked to her car, Sarah's mind raced with everything that had happened. She had come to Rebecca's house to water plants and collect mail, and instead, she had been confronted with a declaration of love that challenged everything she thought she knew about herself and her relationships. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and racing thoughts. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the steering wheel, her mind replaying every word Marcus had spoken, every touch, every look. By the time she pulled into her driveway, she was no closer to knowing what to do than she had been when she'd left Rebecca's house. Inside her own home, Sarah moved through her evening routine mechanically. She changed into her pajamas, made herself a cup of tea, and settled into her favorite chair with a book. But the words on the page swam before her eyes, and she found herself reading the same paragraph over and over without comprehension. At exactly 7 o'clock, she lit her vanilla candle in the kitchen window, the same ritual she had performed every evening for the past 2 years. But tonight, as she watched the flame flicker to life, she couldn't stop thinking about Marcus watching her from across the street, about the way he had noticed this small detail of her life. The thought should have felt invasive, but instead, it felt oddly comforting. For so long, she had felt invisible, forgotten, like a ghost haunting her own life. To know that someone had been watching her, thinking about her, caring about her daily rituals, it made her feel real again. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message, and her heart leaped, thinking it might be Marcus. But it was Rebecca, checking in from her business trip. How did the plant watering go? Hope Marcus wasn't too much trouble. He's been so moody since he moved back home. I think he needs to find a nice girl and settle down. Maybe you could set him up with one of your co-workers. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, her heart sinking. Rebecca had no idea what her son was feeling, no idea that he was interested in anyone, let alone her best friend. The guilt Sarah felt was overwhelming, and she found herself typing and deleting several responses before finally settling on something. Neutral. Plants are fine. Marcus was very helpful. Have a good trip. She set the phone aside and sank deeper into her chair, overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. How could she even consider pursuing something with Marcus when it would mean lying to Rebecca, potentially destroying their friendship? But how could she ignore the way he made her feel, the way he saw her, the possibility of love that she had? Thought was lost to her forever. The next morning, Sarah woke with a headache and a heavy heart. She had slept poorly, tossing and turning as she replayed the previous evening's conversation over and over in her mind. She went through her morning routine like a robot, showering, dressing, and eating breakfast without really being present for any of it. At work, she found it impossible to concentrate. She was a guidance counselor at the local high school, and she prided herself on being fully present for her students. But today, she found herself staring out the window during sessions, thinking about Marcus, about the way he had looked at her, about the door closing behind her. During her lunch break, she walked to the nearby park, hoping the fresh air would clear her head. She found herself on a bench overlooking the pond, watching the ducks paddle lazily through the water. The peaceful scene did nothing to calm her racing thoughts. Sarah. She turned to find Marcus approaching, 2 coffee cups in his hands. He was dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, and Sarah's heart did a little flip at the sight of him. Marcus, she said, her voice catching slightly. What are you doing here? I work nearby, he said, gesturing toward the office building across the street. I saw you from my window. You look like you could use some coffee. He held out one of the cups and Sarah accepted it gratefully. Their fingers brushed as she took the cup, and she felt that familiar electric spark. Thank you, she said, taking a sip. It was perfect, 2 sugars, a splash of cream, exactly how she liked it. You remembered, she said, surprised. Marcus sat down beside her on the bench, careful to maintain some distance. I remember everything about you, Sarah. The way you like your coffee, the way you always order the salmon when we go to Romano's, the way you laugh at your own jokes before you tell them. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. That's embarrassing. It's endearing, Marcus corrected. Everything about you is endearing. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the ducks on the pond. Sarah found herself acutely aware of Marcus's presence beside her, the way he smelled, the way he breathed, the way he occasionally shifted slightly closer to her. I've been thinking about what you said, Sarah said finally. And? Sarah turned to face him, studying his profile. In the afternoon sunlight, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the slight stubble on his jaw, the way his hair curled slightly in the humidity. He was beautiful, she realized, in a way that had nothing to do with his age and everything to do with the kind of man he had become. I'm scared, she admitted. Marcus turned to meet her gaze, his expression gentle. I know. I'm scared too. Ah. You seem so sure of yourself, so confident in what you want. Marcus laughed softly. I'm confident in how I feel about you. I'm not confident in anything else. I don't know how to do this, Sarah. I don't know how to pursue someone who's Known me since I was a teenager. I don't know how to navigate a relationship that could hurt my mother. I'm making this up as I go along." His honesty was disarming, and Sarah felt some of her tension ease. "At least you're making it up. I'm just paralyzed." "You're not paralyzed," Marcus said. "You're here. You're talking to me. That's not paralysis, that's courage." Sarah smiled despite herself. "I don't feel very courageous." "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Marcus said. "It's acting despite the fear. And you're here, despite being afraid. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes again. When had she become someone who cried so easily? But Marcus's words touched something deep inside her. Something that had been dormant for years. "I keep thinking about your mother," she said. "About how this would affect her." Marcus nodded. "I know. I think about her too. But Sarah, my mother loves you. She wants you to be happy. And I think, if she could see past the unconventional nature of this, she would want us to be happy together." "You're very optimistic," Sarah said dryly. "I have to be," Marcus replied. "The alternative is giving up on the best thing that's ever happened to me before it even starts." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. "I'm not the best thing that's ever happened to you, Marcus. I'm middle-aged. I'm set in my ways. You're perfect," Marcus interrupted. "You're kind and funny and intelligent and beautiful. You're strong. Enough to handle teenage drama all day and still have patience for your friends. You're generous enough to drive across town to water someone's plants. You're brave enough to sit on this bench with me even though you're terrified." Sarah stared at him, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his voice. "Marcus, I know you don't see yourself the way I see you," he continued. "But I wish you could. I wish you could see how your eyes light up when you talk about your students, how your whole face changes when you laugh, how graceful you are even when you're just doing ordinary things." Sarah felt herself beginning to cry, tears sliding down her cheeks before she could stop them. "Why are you saying all of this?" "Because it's true," Marcus said simply. "And because I think you've forgotten how extraordinary you are. I think you've been alone for so long that you've started to believe you're not worthy of love. But you are, Sarah. You're worthy of all the love in the world." Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. His touch was so tender, so careful, that Sarah felt something inside her chest crack open. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Neither do I," Marcus admitted. "But maybe we could figure it out together." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her. She thought of Rebecca, of their friendship, of the potential consequences of pursuing something with Marcus. But she also thought of the loneliness that had been her constant companion for years, of the way Marcus looked at her, of the possibility of love that she had thought was lost forever. "One dinner," she said finally, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "But not at a restaurant. Somewhere private, where we can talk without worrying about being seen." Marcus's face lit up with a smile that made Sarah's heart race. "My apartment." Sarah nodded, surprised by her own boldness. "Your apartment. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. This is just dinner. Just talking. I'm not promising anything more than that." "I understand," Marcus said. "When?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Friday night. Rebecca will be back by then, and I'll have had time to process all of this." "Friday night," Marcus agreed. "I'll cook for you. Is there anything you don't eat?" Sarah smiled despite herself. "You're going to cook for me?" "I'm a pretty good cook, actually," Marcus said, looking slightly offended. "I spent 3 years in Chicago learning to fend for myself." "I'm sorry," Sarah said, laughing. "I just can't picture you in the kitchen." You'll be surprised, Marcus said confidently. I make a mean pasta carbonara. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest at the domesticity of the conversation. When was the last time someone had offered to cook for her? When was the last time she had looked forward to dinner with someone? I should get back to work, she said, glancing at her watch. Of course, Marcus said, standing up. But Sarah? She looked up at him, shading her eyes from the sun. Yes? Thank you. For giving us a chance. For being brave enough to try. Sarah felt her cheeks warm again. I haven't been brave in a long time. You're being brave now, Marcus said. And I'm grateful for it. He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently, a gesture so tender and unexpected that Sarah felt her breath catch. Then he was walking away, leaving her sitting on the bench with her heart racing and her mind spinning. Friday night came faster than Sarah had expected. She spent the entire day alternating between nervous excitement and overwhelming anxiety. She changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that was elegant but not too formal. She didn't want to send the wrong message, but she also didn't want to look like she hadn't made an effort. Marcus's apartment was in a converted warehouse downtown, and Sarah felt a flutter of nerves as she rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. When the doors opened, Marcus was waiting for her, dressed in dark jeans and a white button-down shirt that made his eyes look even more intense. You look beautiful, he said, his voice soft with admiration. Thank you, Sarah replied, feeling suddenly shy. You clean up pretty well yourself. Marcus smiled and led her into his apartment. Sarah was surprised by how sophisticated it was. Exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, modern furniture mixed with vintage pieces. It felt like a grown man's space, not the bachelor pad she had been expecting. This is lovely, she said, looking around. Thanks. I spent a lot of time getting it right. I wanted it to feel like home. Marcus led her to the kitchen, where Sarah could see he had been busy. The table was set with actual china and cloth napkins. Candles were flickering, and something delicious was simmering on the stove. You really did cook, Sarah said, impressed despite herself. I told you I would, Marcus replied, moving to the stove to check on whatever was in the pan. I hope you're hungry. I may have gone a little overboard. Sarah watched him move around the kitchen with easy confidence, and she felt something inside her chest loosen. This was nice, she realized. Normal. Like something she could imagine doing regularly. Can I help with anything? She asked. Just sit and let me take care of you, Marcus said, pulling out a chair for her. You spend so much time taking care of everyone else. Let someone take care of you for once. Sarah sank into the chair, feeling unexpectedly emotional. It had been so long since someone had wanted to take care of her, since someone had seen her as worthy of being cared for. Marcus poured her a glass of wine and began serving dinner pasta carbonara just as he had promised, along with a salad and garlic bread. Everything was perfectly prepared, and Sarah found herself relaxing as they ate and talked. This is incredible, she said, taking another bite of the pasta. Where did you learn to cook like this? YouTube, mostly, Marcus admitted with a grin. And a lot of trial and error. I burned a lot of meals in my first year in Chicago. Sarah laughed. Well, you've definitely mastered it now. They talked easily throughout dinner, about his work, her students, books they had both read, movies they wanted to see. Sarah found herself marveling at how easy it was to talk to Marcus, how comfortable she felt with him. The age difference, that had seemed so significant, faded into the background as they discovered shared interests and similar viewpoints. I have a confession, Marcus said as they finished eating. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. Oh? I've been planning this dinner for weeks. I had the whole thing mapped out in my head. what I would cook, what music I would play, what I would. Where? I was terrified you would say no. Sarah smiled, touched by his nervousness. You hid it well. You seemed very confident. I was anything but confident, Marcus admitted. I was terrified I would mess this up, that I would say the wrong thing or come on too strong, or somehow ruin my chance with you. You didn't mess anything up, Sarah said softly. This has been perfect. Marcus's face lit up with relief and joy. Really? Really, Sarah confirmed. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed dinner this much. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. Sarah, I know this is complicated. I know there are a million reasons why this might not work. But I want you to know that I'm serious about this. About us. I'm not some young guy looking for a fling with an older woman. I'm a man who has fallen in love with an incredible woman who happens to be older than me. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. Marcus, I know you're scared, he continued. I know you're worried about my mother, about what people will say, about whether I really know what I want. But I do know. I've known for years, and I'm willing to wait as long as it takes for you to believe it too. Sarah squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. I'm starting to believe it, she whispered. Marcus smiled, the expression so full of hope and love that Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Are you? Yes, Sarah said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. I'm starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. Marcus brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. Does that mean you'll give us a real chance? Not just dinner, but a real relationship? Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision. When she opened them again, Marcus was watching her with an expression of such tender vulnerability that she felt her last defenses crumble. Yes, she said. I'll give us a chance. Marcus's smile was radiant, and Sarah felt something inside her chest bloom with warmth. For the first time in years, she felt hopeful about the future, about the possibility of love, about the chance to be happy again. But we have to tell your mother, she said, her practical side reasserting itself. Not right away, but eventually. I won't sneak around behind her back. I know, Marcus said. And we will. When the time is right, we'll sit down with her together and explain everything. She loves us both, Sarah. She understands. Sarah hoped he was right, but she pushed the worry aside for now. Tonight was about them, about this new beginning, about the possibility of love that had seemed impossible just a week ago. As they cleaned up from dinner, Sarah found herself watching Marcus with new eyes. He was no longer Rebecca's son or the boy she had helped with homework. He was a man who loved her, who saw her as beautiful and worthy of devotion. And maybe, just maybe, she was falling in love with him too. The future was uncertain, fraught with complications and potential heartbreak. But as Marcus pulled her into his arms for their first real kiss, Sarah decided that some risks were worth taking. Some doors, once opened, led to possibilities too beautiful to ignore. And as their lips met in the candlelit kitchen, Sarah finally understood what Marcus had been trying to tell her all along. Love didn't follow rules or respect boundaries. It simply existed, patient and persistent, waiting for the right moment to bloom. The door had locked behind her that night at Rebecca's house, but tonight, Sarah realized, it had also opened to something new, something scary and wonderful and full of hope, something that might just be worth fighting for.